difference is we start from one phase, communication, planning, then modeling, construction, deployment. So we take a set of functions, maybe called as core functionality. We plan for it, we model it, construct it, and we deploy. So first prototype we can say is released. Now for second prototype, which will be increment in that case, for which again we do addition programs. Okay. So in that case, what you do is, because at this point of a time the release is given to the customer will be use it. He'll provide you the feedback that something to be added, something is to be corrected. So in that case, my software is evolving. So along with new functionalities, the existing functions also refined, maybe for their correctness, maybe for accuracy, or maybe for some other things. The requirements are the existing functionality is also being tested by customer. So he provides his feedback. That feedback is also useful, and which will be used in communication phase. Again, the new set of requirements and the previous feedback will be taken. So my product keeps on say increasing in size in that case, similar to my iterative process model. Okay. Then last one in this case is parallel process flow model. So if, as you see in the diagram also there, so what is happening there is there may be some activities which can be performed in parallel. Like we have mentioned that we can perform the communication planning in parallel. So when you are communicating, when communication is being performed, you plan some activities. Okay? And when this is being performed, so communication planning can go parallel. Simultaneously, you can model. So while modeling is being performed, you take input from communication team also. You take input from planning team also, and simultaneously you can model it. Okay. So as you say, the time is mentioned here. So communication, the modeling is being parallelly performed based on modeling is performed parallelly when communication is also being performed and planning is also being performed. So for these activities, we are doing modeling together, and then so we have some part sequential, some part parallel. So that there, depending on the software being built, you can choose which activities can be done in parallel, which activities can be done in parallel phases. So these are the four process models: linear or sequential. Then second one is iterative, evolutionary, and parallel process models. So four process models are there which are available as well. So these process models are different than what we call as a software development lifecycle models as well. So that they will see separately those aspects. Now we have discussed these parts. Okay. Now let's see something about framework activities. Okay. Defining framework activities. So this is a kind of a small example for small project and the complex project. So we are providing one set as such. Okay. So whenever we go for process modeling as such, or process models, we have to define framework activities. Then we have to define the task as such. Okay. So framework activities and tasks, and how to define them. Can we identify some kind of a pattern? So these three things are there: defining process of framework activities, defining task sets, and identifying patterns. So these three things we'll now discuss. Okay. So first is defining a framework activity. So here we identify what actions are appropriate for a framework activity. Say there's a communication is there. So communication activity will identify what all actions are need to be performed. What all actions need to be performed is identified here. Okay. And because this will depend on the nature of problem to be solved. So every action, like we also mentioned that processes or process for one project may be different than the process for other project. Why? Because different projects have different kind of problems. They have different nature of problems, different nature of projects are there. Okay. Then you have a different nature, the characteristics of people doing the work. There are various human traits are there. Characteristics also includes the socio-cultural background as well as their education background or their knowledge background. Okay. There may be a person who has no knowledge of, say, working in the biological projects. Okay. He may be coming from a physics background, or his expertise is in the physics as such. Okay. But you have included him in the project thinking that he will be useful for us. He may have to learn more in that case. Okay. Rather than that, you can just choose a person who is a biologist. So in that case, you can identify what kind of a person is required. So roles, responsibilities, and the knowledge that the person has which is useful for the project, this also identifies what actions are required. Okay? And the stakeholders who are sponsoring the projects. So these all things are there based on which you need to define the actions or set of actions. Okay? So we are giving an example for a small and simple project, a phone call. Okay? So the communication activity is there. So we are doing it by a phone call as such. Okay? Wherein what is being done is sorry, make contact with stakeholder via telephone. You just make a phone call, discuss requirements, take notes, organize notes into a brief written statements of requirements, because it's a simple project as such. It's not a difficult project. It's a kind of a simple project that we want to build in that case. And once you have written the requirements, what you can call as a requirement document, you can send this document to stakeholders for review and approval in that case. Okay? So this way, so remember here, now review and approval is not part of your communication activity as such, okay, or a framework activity. It's a part of your umbrella activities. Okay, so that's why I mentioned review is required. So review is, you are mentioning here review in the phone call as such. Okay, within the communication activity, but it's an umbrella activity. So that's why we are saying that review is done for every kind of activity. Control will be required. So for which umbrella activities will help us. Sorry. If a project is complex, multi-stakeholder project, in that case, a simple phone call is not sufficient. In that case, the communication phase itself may go through the number of steps, like we have mentioned, inception. You do inception of the project, or you inform that okay, this is a project that we are having. So you tell them the what is the intent behind the project, what kind of a say market we are having, what kind of users we are targeting. You elicit the requirements. So when you're communicating with stakeholders, you identify, okay, you tell me what is your requirement, tell me what is your requirement, tell me what is your requirement, because in market there will be a number of stakeholders will be there and number of users are there for, and we have mentioned that every individual may have different kind of a requirement. So you get the requirements from all those people, elaborate each requirement, identify the correlation, similarities, differences in those requirements, negotiate with stakeholders. Okay, I cannot give this requirement, but if you say, if you use this way, you can get a similar kind of functionality. So negotiate for some functionalities to be added, some to be removed. That will be performed with the stakeholders. Then specification is being done. So once you have negotiated and identified that okay, we'll having this number of requirements to be done, then you for those requirements you write a specification document. Okay, so you write a specification document. Once it is done, get it validated from all the stakeholders. Okay, now do you agree? As per our negotiation, we have analyzed that we'll having this number of requirements. Accordingly, we made a specification document. If you agree with this, just check the requirements in the specification document. Are they as per what we have discussed, what we have elaborated, what we have negotiated or not? If agreed, it's validated, you can go for the next phase. Otherwise not. Okay. So for complex project, it's very much necessary that you need to talk with all stakeholders regularly. And obviously, as we have mentioned, this may not be the one-time task. This may require number of iterations. You may require informal meetings as well as formal meetings. Okay? So some of these activities will be done formally, some will be done informally also. Okay? So that will come into this kind of a project. So that's the framework activities definition. Okay? Second is identifying task set. Okay? So this is activity. Within the activity, we have task set. Okay? So as we have mentioned, task set is a collection of software engineering work tasks, related work products, quality assurance points, and project milestones will be part of task set. So you define that once. This is our work product. So for this task, or say there is a big activity is there. Within this activity, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 tasks. So each task will provide you something tangible, or something which you can see as such. Okay, this software is running, or some document is there, some work product is there. Okay? Maybe SRS document, design document, whatever document you are saying, that document will be there. Coding document may be present. Okay, something is there with every task. And with every with those tasks, you can also provide some quality assurance points. Okay, if requirements are understood properly, okay, give some quality assurance points that requirements are understood properly, specified properly, you can go for the next phase. So like this, these are the parts of a task set. You can identify those. So in this case, we also define the actual work to be done to accomplish the objectives of the software engineering action, because what we mentioned is we are having a activity within which we identified the actions. Right? In the framework of activities, we identified actions to be performed. Okay. And now here we are identifying tasks to be performed. All work tasks includes products, milestones, and quality assurance points. Now here we are defining, because as we mentioned that this is where we will accomplish some kind of objectives. So it's very much necessary you define that actual work is being performed in every task set. So every task set will have some kind of a deliverable. Then the goal of requirements in gathering is to understand what various stakeholders want from the software that is to be built. So if you're taking the first task as a communication task, like I mentioned in the previous slide, then if the goal is software requirement engineering, requirement gathering, then in that case, you need to understand from every stakeholder what they want to build. What are the expectations from the software? That means functionality. So you need to understand their requirements, their needs, their expectations from the software as such. So that should be identified as a task set. So we are providing a task set here for a simple small project. The task for requirement gathering might look like this kind of a thing. So these are tasks. So if you see in every part, you will get some kind of a deliverable. Make a list of stakeholders for the project. Definitely you will get a list of stakeholders as a output, as a deliverable. Invite all stakeholders to an informal meeting. So meeting will be conducted. So you are sending the invitation, you are conducting a meeting. Ask each stakeholder to form a list of features and functions required. So you are asking every stakeholder, you write your requirements, you write what kind of features you want in a software, you write what functionalities you want in a software. So they are writing a list and providing to you. Again, you are having a deliverable. Okay? So every task set is giving you some kind of deliverable. Discuss requirements and build a final list. Again, deliverable, you have got a final list. Prioritize requirements. Now you are getting a list of requirements which are prioritized. Okay? And note areas for uncertainty. You are informing specifically that this is where what is uncertain. This is certain. So similarly we say within scope, out of scope. What is being considered right now? You write say I have this kind of a scope. Certain things which are uncertain, unclear, or not understood properly, you mention that this is where I require more information to make it more certain. Okay, for small projects. If a project is complex, some tasks of earlier slide also part of this, but some new are also invited. Okay, now you see here, this is for a complex, larger project. Okay. Make a list of stakeholders for the project. Done. Okay, we'll have a list as output. Interview each stakeholder separately to determine. Something is wrong. You hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, ठीक है. So here we are interviewing every stakeholder to determine the overall wants and needs. So it's not an informal meeting. So it may be formally being performed. Okay. Then we build a preliminary list of functions and features based on stakeholders' input. So from every stakeholder you have taken, so you may be building a preliminary list. Then schedule a series of facilitated application specification meetings. Now what you are doing is you're talking with stakeholders in such a way that you are facilitating them that this is how your application will look like. This is how the certain requirements will look like. This is how the login screen will look like. This is how the background will look like. This is how the communication will be performed. So you are providing them some kind of a specifications. Okay. Again, conduct more meetings and produce informal user scenarios as part of each meeting, because this is a complex project. You have to provide them. Okay, this is how, that's what we mentioned. This is how the login screen will look like. They will provide a user ID here, the password here. Okay. Then you can provide subsequent things like once he logs in, there will be welcome screen. On the welcome screen, he's going to see this kind of items, based on which he will select some of the items, one item, and then he can go for the next screen. So you are providing him the scenarios, how the user will see the software or your application. Okay. Then you refine user scenarios based on stakeholder feedback, because you are providing them in the informal way, though you are providing them informal way, how the user scenarios will look like. They will give you them feedback. No, we don't want this way. We want this way. We want to change this login screen. Login password should not appear in the center of a screen. It should appear in the corner of a screen because we have other contents on our screen. Okay? Or when you are providing login screen, along with that, on the sides, we want to provide some kind of advertisements, because we are giving this facility free of cost. So to get some kind of say revenues, we'll provide some advertisements alongside the login screen. So there will be different things that the customer, the stakeholders may provide you as a feedback. Okay? Then build a revised list of stakeholder requirements. Okay. So first we had a preliminary list as point number 3. You see here with a list of functions. Okay. Preliminary list. Now we are having again refine the user scenario. We build the revised list after refining the scenarios. Okay. Now use quality function deployment techniques to prioritize requirements. So what is being done here is quality function deployment techniques. So you identify here which are core functionalities, which are additional functionalities, which functionality should go first, which should go later on. So that way you prioritize. Then package requirements so that they can be delivered incrementally, because it's a complex project, it's a large project. It will not be provided as a single part in that case. Okay, at the end. Okay? So you're going to provide it incrementally. So you can use say iterative model, revolutionary model in that case to do this kind of a thing. Then node constraints and restrictions will be placed on the system. Once you set them, once you send the first increment, you check from there will be the feedback. Okay, these are the constraints. Like we mentioned, when we are running a Windows 10 or Ubuntu, they provide you the minimum requirements for the software to run. These are constraints, because this software is to be, if you're doing the software, if you're just having 1 GB of RAM, software will not function properly. Okay? So you are providing the constraints and restrictions for the system to function. And then you also have to discuss methods for validation of the system. So in that case, we say how we are going to test software. So validate the software, validate the delivery, validate the functionality. So you're going to discuss the methods and note down. So if you see for all these task sets, we are having some kind of output, some kind of a deliverable with every task. So again, this may be just a communication activity. So within the communication activity, you are performing all these tasks. So this is my task set for communication activity action be performed. Okay. Now this is a part that is called as process patterns. Okay. So process patterns will be used as and when required for providing some kind of a functionality, okay? Or for providing some kind of a templates to the users or to the developers, so that it becomes easier for them to run the system, to check for the errors or to find the solutions easily. Okay? So as you know, the patterns is a template, or pattern is a simple, in simple sense we say it is something which is repeating number of times, okay? Which comes again and again. That becomes a pattern. Okay. So if you see this kind of a pattern coming up, so the problem may have a pattern. So a problem comes in a pattern, we will have a set of solutions also available. So that means we are having a template. So if this problem comes up, there is a solution available for this problem. Okay. So that's where we use this process pattern. So a process pattern is a template that provides a consistent means for describing a pattern. So patterns can be defined at any level of abstraction. So we'll see that also. So this is a proposed template by Ambler. Okay, Ambler has given this as a template. So what it includes is a pattern name. There are different various forces. Why this? If something happens in the pattern, say we'll take the example subsequently that requirements are unclear or unambiguous. So that's the pattern, because we know that customer has a myth that now even if I just give general information about a software, the developer will understand and he will build the software for me. But that's a myth. Okay? And however, many times this kind of things will come. Stakeholder will say, okay, build the product like this. Okay? But you don't know the requirements. So that's the problem. So there are certain forces for it. Then there are types of patterns. Maybe for some stage, some task, some phase, the pattern will occur. Okay? So it maybe a pattern occurs in the phase, in some task, or in some stage. There are types of patterns it occurs. Some initial context, why this pattern has occurred, why this problem has occurred, problem, solution, resulting context, related patterns, known uses and examples of that template. So we are giving an example here for the process template. The example pattern is given, requirements unclear is a pattern name. It's defined. So anybody who has say requirements unclear, he sees that my requirements are not clear, he can use this template. He can use this template and accordingly process so that his requirements become clear. Okay. So these are meant for solving some kind of a problems. Okay. So what is the intent of this pattern? This pattern describes an approach for building a model or a prototype that can be assessed iteratively by stakeholders in an effort to identify or solidify software requirements. So if software requirements are unclear, what is the intent of this pattern? To identify requirements more clearly, to clarify the requirements, to identify the requirements, or to solidify the software requirements. That's the intent. Okay. Now, what is the type? It appears in the phase. It's a phase pattern because requirements is a phase. We have requirements as a phase. In the communication activity, we have a requirement phase within which this pattern occurs. What is the initial context? So initial context is when you say requirements are unclear, that means somebody is there who has given you some requirements. So you must have identified some prior things. There are some kind of a prior information is available. So like stakeholders have been identified. There are some stakeholders who have given you some information, but some information they are not provided. So you know that these are the stakeholders whom I am supposed to ask that please tell me what exactly you want. So stakeholders have been identified. So this is a prior information or prior necessities are there. A mode of communication between stakeholders and software team has been established. So you know that stakeholders are there. There's a communication method is there. Third, overriding software problem to be solved has been identified by the stakeholders. So they know that there is a software problem, overriding software problem is there, which has been identified by the stakeholders. And fourth thing is initial understanding of the project scope, basic business requirements and project constraints have been developed. This is also being done. Basic business requirements are known. Okay. You want, so that's what we are saying. You know some requirements are very much clear, some are not clear, okay, for which we are doing this kind of activity. Okay. So that's a template. So we are using this template for solving this pattern. So pattern is now identified as a requirements unclear pattern. Okay. Now next thing, it's a problem. What is the problem? Obviously, when you say requirements are unclear, now you are defining yourself. The one who says that requirements are unclear, he is defining, okay, requirements are quite hazy or non-existent. Either requirements are not existing only, or they are defined ambiguously. There is no clear recognition that what is to be solved, what is to be done, what functions are to be developed, not clearly explained. So the problem must be addressed with the software solution. What is explained is, okay, they have said, okay, there is some kind of a problem for which we require a software solution. Like we say, automation is to be performed. So say automation of door locking system or the locking and opening system is to perform. So this is known, that problem is known, that I want to open and lock the door using a software. But how? What is not explained is whether I am supposed to use a fingerprint, whether I'm supposed to use my iris, whether I'm supposed to use a face recognition system, whether I require to use a combination of biometrics, say thumb and a face, thumb and eyes, or 5 fingers or entire hand has to be there. That's not specified. Okay. So problem is known, and how it is to be solved is also known. So this is known, but other things are unknown. Okay. So that's why we are saying some requirements are done, some are not. So stakeholders are unsure of what they want. That is, they cannot describe software requirements in any detail. What exactly you want in the software, or what exactly the stakeholders want in software has not been explained by them to us. That's the problem. So what is the solution? The description of the prototyping process would be considered. So this is solution provided for this kind of a problem. So what we do is, a prototype can be developed. So we can suggest, okay, you are unclear about requirements. I'm not able to understand what you want. However, we know that we want a software solution for some kind of a problem. Like we are giving the example of door unlocking system or door locking unlocking system by using a thumb or various ways as such. So what I will do, say as a software developer, we will do is, okay, I will provide you first a prototype. You have a door, we will put a lock there, and the lock will be opened by, say, a thumb or by, say, voice mechanism. I say open, it should open. When I say close or lock, it should lock. Or automatically also, if there is a delay, it remains open for more amount of time, it automatically locks. Okay, I am providing a prototype in that case as a developer. When he sees this prototype, he'll say, okay, no, I don't want voice based because some other person may come and mimic my voice. So I don't want voice based. So now he is telling you he don't want voice based. Now we will ask him, what do you want then? So okay, thumb, use my thumb. Okay, he says, okay, use your thumb. So if thumb impression, only thumb impression is required, it can be copied also. Okay, along with thumb, let there be some kind of a heat. Okay? So there has to be some kind of temperature, so it should identify. So if it's a cold hand is there, then the cold hand, it should not identify. So there has to be some body temperature, minimum temperature should be there, or minimum and maximum temperature. You present some threshold. Within this threshold, if temperature is there and a thumb is there. So if thumb image with that temperature comes up, I will open the lock. Now the requirements are becoming clear. So you are providing a solution in terms of prototypes in that case. So resulting context will be a software prototype that identifies basic requirements, mode of interaction, computational features, processing functions, is approved by stakeholders. Then what will you do is you will provide a prototype. Then prototype may evolve through a series of increments to become a product software itself. Now we are going to create a prototype, as he has explained that you create a software which is thumb based, taking some kind of a temperature also. Okay? Now that's the prototype. So there are two ways now. You build the prototype and you increment it with additional functionalities to create an entire software. Second is discard the prototype and the production software will be built using some other process pattern. May not be prototype based, maybe some, say, waterfall model or evolutionary process model or agile process model that may be used. So we have provided one process model here, like a prototyping process model can be used in that case. So related patterns are there with which this process pattern may be related. So templates are available for that also, you can say, like customer communication, attitude design, attitude development, customer assessment, requirement extraction. So these are all related to this requirement. Okay. So this is an example of a template and how template is being used for a specific process or for a specific pattern where the requirements are unclear. Okay. And there are others also. So if you say customer communication is a pattern, okay, that is identified that customer communication has not been established. You have a requirements, but you don't have a customer communication. You haven't talked with the customer in that case. So that in that case you can use other patterns or attitude design also in that case. Known users and examples. So prototyping is recommended when requirements are uncertain. So you are not just providing a solution. Along with the solution, you are providing historically or empirically or in the organization, our organization or in general, prototyping is used as and when requirements are unclear or uncertain. So that time it is useful, it is tested for those things. So that's why we can use these requirements, we can use this say prototyping model for that purpose. Now that has given you the clear understanding. Okay? So in that case we say it's provided a clear understanding of how to sort out these models or how to sort out this kind of a problem in that case. Okay? So pattern. So that's what we have discussed. So for today, what we discussed is we talked about process models. Before that, we talked about myths. So we talked about myths, management myths, customer myths, and what was third one? Practitioner myths. Then we talked about process models, what process models are, in which we talked about the generic process model, where we are having a process framework, and then we are having umbrella activities at the background, and then we have framework activities, which are 5 in number as well. So 5 framework activities backed by umbrella activities we have seen. Then we have discussed about the process flow or process flow models as such. So we have discussed 4 process flow models: iterative, linear, evolutionary, and parallel process models. Right? Then we talked about when we arrange these process models. So within the processes, we mentioned we have activities, actions, and tasks. So within each framework activity, we have set of actions. So identify set of actions, and for all the set of actions, we identify set of tasks. And as and when we face some kind of a difficulty, we look for a process pattern. Okay? So the templates are available for that. As we have seen, one of the templates which can be used as a as a means for understanding how templates can be used for a purpose. Okay? That's all for the day from my end. If you have any questions, you can ask.